Many people look to the world and ask questions about power. Who is stronger? Who is weaker? Who will win if conflict arises? Who will dominate and who will fall? These questions are not new. They have been asked for thousands of years. Nations rise and nations fall. Flags change, leaders change, maps are rewritten, but the questions remain the same. One asks, Iran versus Israel, who would win? But behind this question hides a deeper mystery, one that most people do not care to explore. What if the conflict you see outside is only a mirror of the conflict that lives inside you? What if the question you are truly asking is not about politics or territory, but about the human condition, about yourself? In every human being there is a war, not between two countries, but between two states of being. There is a side of you that wants to grow, to transcend, to build, to live peacefully. And there is another side of you that reacts, that is angry, that holds resentment, that seeks control, domination, and power. These are not separate beings. These are not distant lands. They are energies that live inside your own consciousness. Some people live their whole life unaware that this battle is taking place inside them. They think the only threats are outside, that someone else is responsible for their pain, for their anxiety, for their failures. But in the teachings of internal cultivation, the first lesson is that the battlefield begins in the mind. The mind is the general, the emotions are the soldiers, and the body is the battlefield upon which the consequences are felt. You must learn to see this. The moment you wake up in the morning, the war begins. You have the option to either rise with clarity, with peace, with self-discipline, or to fall into routine, distraction, and mindlessness. When you see someone disrespectful, you have the choice to respond with understanding or to explode in prideful reaction. When things do not go your way, you can respond with presence or complain with self-pity. These are not small choices. These are the daily decisions that shape your internal kingdom. To ask who would win between Iran and Israel is to externalize a question that is spiritual in nature. Do you want to know who will win in a battle? First, look into your own thoughts. Who is winning there? Look at your thoughts. Observe them. Every time a negative thought arises and you allow it to control your body, your breathing, your reactions, that part of you wins. Every time a judgmental, hateful, or prideful idea takes root in your mind and leads to action, you have given power to the enemy within. But if you pause, if you breathe, if you observe that thought without becoming it, then you have taken one step toward victory. The greatest martial artists in the world do not fight because they are angry. They fight because they are prepared. They fight when it is needed, but their discipline is what prevents unnecessary conflict. Their strength lies not in aggression, but in stillness. Likewise, your greatest power is not your anger, it is your awareness. The conflict between nations is often a symbol for the internal struggle between different forces in your own being. The desire for peace, the pull of war, the longing for understanding, the temptation of judgment. These opposites are not evil or good in themselves. They are simply expressions of consciousness at different levels of awareness. The lower self seeks division, the higher self seeks unity. The immature mind seeks control, the mature mind seeks understanding, but both live within you. Every day, your actions reflect who is winning. Do you wake up and practice gratitude, or do you wake up already caught in the anxiety of what you lack? Do you discipline your body and mind with exercise, meditation, or service to others, or do you allow laziness to dictate your direction? These choices may seem unrelated to questions about politics or international conflict, but they are not, because a nation is made of individuals, and individuals create the collective state of mind that shapes the world. When enough people conquer themselves, there is no need for war. But when people are ruled by greed, by fear, by pride, then conflict is inevitable. The wars you see in the world begin with the battles people lose within themselves. A man who cannot conquer his own anger will eventually spill it onto others. A leader who is controlled by ego will eventually lead his nation into suffering. A population that is distracted and divided will allow violence to seem like the only option. So if you are truly interested in knowing who would win, start with your own mind. The person who knows how to silence the noise in his head is more powerful than the one who controls armies. The one who can sit still with his own thoughts, without distraction, without fear, without running away. He is stronger than 1,000 warriors. Why? Because the greatest battle is not fought on land or sea, it is fought in the space between your thoughts and your awareness. And few have the discipline to enter that arena daily. This path is not for the weak. To look inward requires courage. It is easier to point the finger at others. It is easier to say, they are the problem. But a true practitioner of the way asks first, what part of this exists in me? If there is hatred in the world, do I carry hatred in my own heart? If there is violence in the world, is there violence in my own speech, my own intentions, my own judgments? This is the beginning of awakening. The teachings of the ancient masters were never about gaining external power. They were about mastering the inner kingdom. And in that inner kingdom, you are both the ruler and the subject. You are both the creator and the destroyer. If you do not rule your mind will rule you. If you do not train your thoughts, they will train you. People want quick answers. They want to know who would win in a conflict. But very few want to sit with the discomfort of their own ignorance. The truth is that no one wins when both sides are blind, and no one loses when one side awakens. Peace is not something you can force upon the world, it is something you must first discover within yourself. Only then does it spread. To observe the world is to observe yourself. The wars between nations mirror the wars between thoughts in your mind. Division, fear, suspicion, and pride, these are the real enemies. And they live not only in governments or religions or histories. They live in every mind that is unconscious. When you raise your awareness, you take power away from these enemies. When you act with compassion, you disarm them. When you stay present, you defeat them. So again the question arises, Iran vs. Israel, who would win? And again I say, the real question is, what is happening inside of you? Are you dominated by reaction or governed by discipline? Are you consumed by fear or grounded in presence? Are you ruled by your past or led by your purpose? Only you can answer this, but understand this clearly. Before a nation can conquer another, it must conquer itself. And before you can change the world, you must first be transformed. Not by force, but by understanding. Not by domination, but by discipline. Not by shouting louder, but by listening deeper. There is a famous saying, it is better to conquer yourself than to win 1,000 battles. Why is that true? Because every external battle is temporary. Every victory fades. But the one who masters himself remains undefeated. He walks in peace. He moves with clarity. He is not easily provoked. He does not act from impulse. His words are chosen. His actions are deliberate. His presence is healing. When you train the body, you grow stronger. When you train the mind, you grow wiser. But when you train the spirit, you become unshakable. And it is the unshakable person who creates peace wherever he goes. To train the spirit means to see yourself honestly. It means facing the parts of you that you want to hide. It means admitting that you are still learning. It means letting go of the need to always be right. It means stepping out of the story of me versus them and stepping into the awareness of, I am part of the whole. Only in that state does the question who would win dissolve. Because there is no longer a need to win. There is only a need to awaken. And when you awaken, your presence is your power. Your silence is your strength. Your peace is your resistance to the chaos of the world. So ask yourself daily, who is winning within me today? The voice of fear or the voice of trust? The voice of anger or the voice of understanding? The voice of distraction or the voice of discipline? Your answer will not only determine the quality of your life, it will determine the future of the world around you. Because every awakened mind becomes a light in the darkness. And the more lights we ignite, the less darkness there is to fight. This is the path, this is the real battle. Not Iran versus Israel, not one nation versus another, but awareness versus ignorance, wisdom versus ego, peace versus inner conflict. And only you can choose which side you are on. When we speak of conflict, of confrontation or war, whether it is between two countries or two individuals, it is easy to see the surface, two sides, two flags, two identities, each believing they are right, each clinging to their own truth. But if you have ever observed the mind, if you have truly sat still and studied your thoughts, you will know that the root of all division is not in land, not in borders, not even in belief. The root of all division is the ego. The ego is not something you see, it is not something you hear, it is something you feel silently. Behind every judgment, every reaction, every desire to prove yourself. The ego is not bad, it is not evil, it is simply unconscious. Its only concern is to preserve itself, and to preserve itself, it must divide, compare, protect, and control. When one asks, who will win, Iran or Israel, what is really being asked is, whose ego will be stronger, which identity will dominate. But there is a great danger in this line of thinking, because once the ego takes control, the heart is silenced, compassion is discarded, humility disappears, and when ego leads, wisdom vanishes. When a man is ruled by ego, he sees only the difference between himself and others. He focuses on separation. He forgets the shared breath, the shared suffering, the shared humanity. And a world that forgets its shared nature will always walk the path toward conflict. You have to understand something fundamental. The ego lives in every mind. It does not matter what religion you follow, it does not matter which country you are born in, it does not matter if you call yourself spiritual. The ego does not care about your beliefs. It only wants to survive. It survives through conflict. It feeds on comparison. It strengthens itself through the illusion of me versus you. Every time you say, I am better, ego grows. Every time you say, they are wrong, ego sharpens. Every time you say, I am the victim, ego hides behind your pain. And every time you act from a place of superiority, inferiority, or identity, the ego wins a small battle. But the cost is heavy, your peace. To conquer the ego does not mean to destroy it, it means to see it, to be aware of it, to recognize when it speaks and to choose whether to listen. Because you are not your ego, you are the awareness that notices the ego. That part of you, pure, silent, observant, does not need to win, it does not need to compare, it simply sees what is. That is where the true strength lies. Ego is not only what creates war between nations, it is what creates war in your own home. When you cannot listen to your partner without the need to be right, that is ego. When you feel threatened by someone else's success, that is ego. When you cannot apologize, when you cannot forgive, when you cannot let go, ego is holding the sword. It is a subtle master. It speaks in your voice. It wears the mask of righteousness. It says, you must not lose. It says, they are beneath you. But what it never says is the truth. I am afraid. I am insecure. I am trying to survive. That is the ego's secret. All of its pride is built on fear, and until you face that fear with awareness, you will be ruled by it. What does this have to do with the world, with war, with countries at odds? Everything. Because no nation is an entity on its own. Every nation is a mirror of its people, and the collective ego of a population, when left unchecked, can lead to the illusion of superiority, the justification of violence, the glorification of war. When a nation is ruled by ego, it will sacrifice peace for pride. And when its people are unconscious of their own inner wars, they will project them outward. They will seek enemies to validate their suffering. This is why ancient teachings always begin with the self. Not because the self is selfish, but because peace is born in the individual and then spreads outward. And likewise, conflict begins within and then infects the world. You cannot bring light to the world if your own house is in darkness. You cannot bring unity if your thoughts are divided. You cannot bring healing if your own wounds remain unseen. The path of inner cultivation teaches us to observe the ego without becoming it. It teaches us to respond instead of react. It teaches us that strength is not in dominance, but in humility. True humility is not weakness, it is the courage to say I do not know. It is the strength to listen without defense. It is the wisdom to see yourself in others, even in your so-called enemy. Do you understand what it means to see yourself in others? It does not mean you agree. It does not mean you accept harm. It means that beneath every belief, behind every fear, under every mask, there is the same light, the same desire to be safe, the same longing to be seen, the same pain of being misunderstood, the same joy of being loved. If you cannot see that, it is not because it isn't there, it is because ego has placed a veil over your eyes. This is the discipline of awareness. To notice when you are slipping into judgment, to pause when your mind wants to label someone as the other, to breathe when you want to react. These are small acts on the outside, but great victories on the inside, because every time you do this, you are stepping out of ego, you are returning to presence, and from presence, true wisdom arises. Do not think the ego is only active during conflict. It is present in your everyday life. When you want recognition, when you seek praise, when you feel offended, ego is speaking. It whispers, you must be respected. It shouts, you must be heard. And it never allows silence, because in silence the ego begins to dissolve, and that is its greatest fear. The person who lives fully in the ego is like a warrior who is always drawing his sword. He is always ready to fight, but he is also always afraid, because deep inside he knows he is not at peace. He knows he is fragile, and so he covers that fragility with loudness, with control, with pride. But the true warrior, the one who has faced his inner fears, he no longer needs to prove anything. He walks quietly. His strength is calm, his presence is his shield, and his silence is more powerful than 1,000 words. This is the kind of strength the world needs. Not more weapons, not more arguments, not more victories, but more individuals who are courageous enough to face their own ego and choose peace anyway, not because they are weak, but because they understand that every war, whether in the mind or on the map, begins with the refusal to listen, the refusal to understand, and the refusal to see the other as yourself. So if you ask who would win, perhaps you should first ask, what part of me is asking that question? Is it the part that seeks truth, or the part that seeks to be right? Is it the part that wants peace, or the part that wants power? If ego is asking the question, then no answer will satisfy it, because the ego always needs to be fed, and it is never full. But if awareness is asking the question, then even the silence can be the answer. To understand the ego is to begin freeing yourself from its grip. You do not need to kill it. You do not need to shame it. You only need to see it clearly. When you can observe your own reactions, your own pride, your own need to win, without judgment, but with honesty, you are already beginning to master it. A person who is free from ego is not without opinion. They simply are not attached to it. They can listen deeply even when they disagree. They can step away even when provoked. They can stay grounded even when challenged. This is not suppression, this is mastery. And this mastery is what creates harmony, not only in your personal life, but in the world. You may not control what happens between nations, but you can control how you respond to difference. You can control how you speak, how you treat others, how you choose to move in the world. And when you move from presence instead of ego, your actions become medicine, your life becomes a quiet teaching, and others feel it. This is the work, not to defeat others, but to overcome the need to defeat. Not to silence others, but to rise above the noise. Not to dominate, but to understand. And this work must be done within you, again and again, because the ego does not disappear overnight. It returns. It disguises itself, it adapts. But with practice, with discipline, and with presence, you will see it sooner. You will catch it fast. You will no longer believe its stories. And in doing so, you become free. You become the kind of human being who brings clarity instead of confusion, who brings calm instead of chaos, who brings presence instead of provocation. That is the real victory, not when you win an argument, not when your side is proven right. And so I ask you not to concern yourself with who would win between nations, but to ask who is winning inside of you. The ego or the awareness? The reaction or the presence? The need to be right or the courage to be open? This question, though quiet, is more powerful than any battle, and the answer, though personal, has the power to shape the world. When the world is loud with fear, when minds are consumed by headlines and speculation, when entire populations are caught in the tide of what if, there is a truth that gets buried, a truth so quiet that only the still can hear it, that the real battlefield has never been the land between borders. It has always been the space within the human mind. It has never been about Iran or Israel or any other nation. It has always been about us. What is happening within us when we seek to label, to choose a side, to judge, to celebrate the suffering of others, or to fear those we do not understand? Fear is an ancient survival mechanism. It lives in the body like a shadow lives under light. When something unfamiliar appears, fear rises. When something threatens identity, belief, or comfort, fear strengthens. It is not wrong to feel fear, it is natural, but the problem is not fear itself. The problem is when fear becomes your master. Because when fear rules the mind, wisdom is cast out. When fear drives the heart, compassion collapses. And when fear takes over speech, it does not speak truth, it only echoes pain. Fear says they are not like us. Fear says they are dangerous. Fear says if we do not act now, we will be destroyed. But this voice is ancient and primal. It is not thoughtful. It does not understand balance. It does not ask, is this true? It only screams, survive. And when entire societies are driven by this unexamined fear, they become fragile. Because anything built on fear must constantly protect itself. It cannot relax. It cannot trust. It cannot breathe. There is a practice that very few are willing to do because it is difficult. It is to sit with fear, not to fight it, not to avoid it, not to drown in it, but to watch it. To see what it does to your body, how it shapes your breath, how it changes your thoughts. Fear is not clever. It repeats the same stories over and over. They hate us. We must strike first. We are in danger. We must protect our own. And the more you listen without awareness, the more those stories become reality, not because they are true, but because your belief makes them so. What happens in war is often a reflection of what happens inside an individual who is ruled by fear. When a person is afraid, they defend, they close, they project, they attack preemptively. They see every glance as a threat, every silence as judgment, every different opinion as an insult. And what they cannot control, they try to destroy. Do you see this behavior only in nations? Or do you also see it in relationships, in conversations, in the way you react when someone challenges you? You cannot end war if you are at war with your own fear. You cannot create peace by resisting fear. You must transform fear. And transformation is not a loud act. It is not a heroic gesture. It is a quiet discipline. It is when you say, I see this fear. I feel its energy, but I will not obey it blindly. This is a subtle but powerful form of mastery, because in that moment you are no longer a slave to the ancient programs of your nervous system. You are choosing presence over panic. When we say Iran versus Israel or any other form of us versus them, we must ask, who is creating this division? And more importantly, what emotion is feeding it? If it is fear, then we must be careful, because fear does not see clearly. It distorts, it exaggerates, it selects evidence that supports its narrative and ignores all that does not. Fear makes you see a monster where there is only a man. Fear makes you see an enemy where there is simply another human being trying to survive, just like you. The path of mastery is not to be without fear. It is to walk through fear without becoming it. It is to carry the fire of awareness so brightly within you that even when fear knocks, you do not answer as a servant. You answer as a witness. You say, I feel you, but I will not become you. And that is how you reclaim your power. So what happens when fear is no longer your master? Your perception changes. You no longer look at others through the lens of threat. You begin to ask questions. What pain might they be carrying? What story have they been told? What grief have they inherited? You stop reducing people to symbols. You stop treating entire cultures as single identities. You begin to listen, not with your ears, but with your silence. And in that silence, understanding grows. Fear cannot survive in deep presence, because fear needs time. It needs a future to worry about and a past to regret. Presence is the still point where neither exists. It is the breath, it is the now. And the more you return to this moment, not in theory but in practice, the less grip fear will have on you. The more you will respond instead of react. The more you will see the humanity in others, even those you once saw as opposite. Look at the way people speak during times of political tension. The language becomes rigid, the voice becomes louder, certainty increases. But inside, there is often a silent trembling. That trembling is fear, unacknowledged. The louder someone becomes in their opinion, the more likely they are hiding an inner fear of being uncertain. Because uncertainty feels like death to the ego, and the ego says, if I am not sure, I am not safe. But real strength is the opposite. It is the ability to sit with uncertainty without collapsing. It is the willingness to hold complexity without simplifying everything into black and white. It is easy to fall into the illusion of simplicity, to say, they are wrong, we are right, they are dangerous, we are peaceful. But the world does not work this way. People are not binary. Nations are not monoliths. Each person carries their own history, their own trauma, their own vision of justice. And every conflict has 1,000 perspectives, none of which can be fully grasped through news, through slogans, through loud opinions. Only through silence and deep presence can we begin to feel the truth beneath the noise. Fear loves loudness. It thrives in chaos. But truth is quiet. It sits patiently, waiting for you to become still enough to hear it. That stillness is your responsibility. You cannot demand it from others if you do not cultivate it in yourself. This is the real preparation for peace. Not more arguments, not more analysis, not more fear-based action, but the quiet strength of awareness that says, I will not become what I fear. When you understand this, something shifts. You stop needing to predict who will win. You stop projecting outcomes. You stop fantasizing about revenge or victory. You begin to see that the only thing truly worth winning is your own clarity. The only thing truly worth protecting is your peace. Because from that peace, your actions are clean. Your words are healing. Your presence is a refuge. And yes, the world may still move toward conflict, but your inner world will not be shaken so easily, and from that unshakable place, your influence will be deeper than you know. Every calm person in a storm becomes a center of gravity. Every aware person in a fearful world becomes a lighthouse. Not by shouting, but by being. Not by preaching, but by embodying. Not by judging, but by seeing clearly without closing the heart. This is the warrior's path, not to conquer others, but to overcome the unconscious forces within that keep the world in chains. To master fear is not to feel invincible. It is to be intimate with vulnerability without fleeing from it. To allow the heart to remain open even when the mind wants to build walls. To allow grief to move through you without turning it into hatred. Because if you truly look, you will see that much of what we call hate is simply fear that has not been heard, pain that has not been honored, sorrow that has turned hard from years of being ignored. And so if you truly want to understand another, whether a person, a culture, or a country, you must go beyond their actions. You must see the fear underneath, not to excuse it, but to understand it. And through understanding, the heart softens. And only a soft heart can shape a peaceful world. This is not an easy path. It requires daily discipline. To breathe when you want to argue, to listen when you want to shout, to reflect when you want to react. But this is the work that changes the world, not through policy, not through power, but through presence. Through the quiet revolution of choosing awareness in a world that is addicted to fear. You may not be able to control the fate of nations, but you can decide whether fear will control you. That choice, made again and again, is how peace begins, not on the battlefield, not in negotiations, but in the silent chamber of the human mind, where fear is either obeyed or observed. In the end, the only true victory is not one nation over another, not Iran defeating Israel, not Israel overcoming Iran. The real victory lies in the elevation of the human spirit above the impulses of violence, fear, revenge, and blind allegiance. To understand this, one must step back, not just from the political tension, but from the conditioned mind that craves conflict, that feeds on polarity, and that finds identity in opposition. The true battle has never been out there. It has always been inside. And so the real question is not who would win, but rather what kind of human being do I choose to become in the presence of conflict? It is easier to speak about others than to examine the self. It is easier to chant slogans, wave flags, share opinions, and cast judgment than to sit quietly and ask, what is my role in all of this? But stillness does not come from ease. Stillness comes from mastery, mastery of attention, mastery of energy, mastery of the inner world. Because the person who cannot govern his own mind will always look outward to control others, and the person who has not achieved peace within will always find chaos in the world, even where there is none. Victory without consciousness is temporary. Peace without wisdom is fragile, and strength without compassion is hollow. The only form of strength that endures is the kind that comes from self-understanding. It is the strength that does not shout, it does not strike first, it does not seek destruction. It is the strength that sees clearly, feels deeply, and acts precisely, not out of anger, but out of alignment with a higher order of being. This is not weakness. This is the rarest form of power. It is the power that cannot be taken away by any external force. The world often misunderstands what victory means. We are taught that to win is to dominate, to win is to suppress the other. To win is to humiliate, to conquer, to prove superiority. But this view is immature. It is the perspective of the ego, terrified of being insignificant. True victory does not require an enemy. It requires courage. Courage to look inward, courage to forgive, courage to transcend. The monk in solitude who conquers his anger is far more victorious than the soldier who conquers a land, because one has changed the future, the other has merely repeated the past. What is the legacy of violence? More fear, more trauma, more separation. The child raised in rubble does not forget the sound of war. The mind shaped by loss does not easily learn to trust. When we speak of war, we often speak in abstract terms, strategies, alliances, victories. But war is not abstract to the soul. It is the loud memory of suffering. It is the body carrying grief that cannot be named. It is the heart closing to the possibility of unity because it has only ever known division. The victory we seek must go beyond borders. It must reach into the soul. The real revolution is inner. It is in how we treat those who disagree with us. It is in whether we are willing to listen before we defend. It is in whether we can hold space for pain without needing to fix, attack, or escape it. This is spiritual strength. The Shaolin tradition teaches that the strongest warrior is not the one who defeats many in battle, but the one who defeats himself again and again, until all that remains is awareness, peace, and service. You must ask yourself, what is the cost of your victory? If to win means you lose your humanity, it is not victory. If to win means you become what you once despised, it is not transformation, it is imitation. If to win means the other must suffer, you have not elevated yourself, you have merely shifted the suffering. This is not evolution, this is repetition in a different costume. Now consider this. The energy you carry shapes the world more than the words you say. A person full of peace brings peace into every room. A person who has mastered his thoughts leaves no room for escalation. A person who has stilled his own internal war becomes a living invitation for others to do the same. This is how peace spreads, not through treaties signed by the fearful, but through individuals who no longer serve fear. Every time you look at another human being and think, enemy, you create a division in yourself. Because what you reject in others is often what you have not yet healed in yourself. The root of every judgment is inner insecurity. The root of every hatred is a wound that was never given light. If you truly want to help the world rise above war, you must begin by healing your inner world. Not once, not temporarily, but continuously. This is the true warrior's discipline. And so we return to the question, who would win? The answer is clear, if you see deeply. The one who wins is not the one who strikes first, not the one with the louder voice or stronger army, not the one who captures the flag or silences the opposition. The one who wins is the one who no longer needs war to feel alive. The one who wins is the one who no longer needs to be right in order to feel worthy. The one who wins is the one who no longer sees others as threats, but as mirrors. All spiritual masters have said it in different ways. The outer world is a reflection of the inner state. If the world is in chaos, it is because our collective minds are chaotic. If the world is in fear, it is because fear has been normalized, commercialized, and disguised as patriotism or wisdom. But once you see fear for what it is, a signal, not a master, you can begin to dismantle its influence. And when fear loses its grip, the heart opens again. And when the heart opens, new possibilities arise. Solutions no longer come from reaction, but from stillness, from vision, from love, not sentimental love, but the fierce love that refuses to abandon humanity, even when it is lost. In the silence of meditation, you learn something powerful, that peace is not passive. Peace is an active choice. It takes effort, it takes awareness, it takes the willingness to disappoint the ego. It takes the strength to walk away from the temptation of righteousness. Much harder to ask, what part of me is being triggered, than to say, you're wrong. But this is why so few achieve real peace, because it demands everything false to die. It demands that you let go of the comfort of being a victim, that you surrender the safety of your identity, that you transcend even your own culture if it means honoring a deeper truth. And this is not betrayal, it is alignment. It is not disloyalty, it is the highest form of loyalty. Loyalty to wisdom. The real victory is when enough people realize that suffering does not have to be inherited, that pain does not have to be recycled, that the patterns of war, hatred, and dehumanization can end with you. You can be the one who says no more. Not from defiance, but from clarity, from truth, from awakened understanding. Victory is when you walk through conflict without carrying it into your next conversation. Victory is when you listen to someone who reminds you of your enemy and still keep your heart open. Victory is when you realize that peace is not the absence of war. It is the presence of understanding, compassion, and unshakable awareness. You may not lead a country, you may not have influence over governments or armies, but you lead your life, you lead your mind, you lead your speech. And that leadership, when it is clean, when it is aware, when it is rooted in higher values, that is enough. Because one awakened person is more powerful than 1,000 unconscious ones. One deeply aware human being is a signal to the world that another way is possible. If you seek victory, seek it there, not in the battlefield, but in the quiet victory of your next breath. Not in defeating others, but in no longer needing to defeat. Not in being stronger, but in being clearer. Not in being louder, but in being deeper. This is the victory that matters. This is the victory that heals.